Hello, welcome to It's Not Your Money, real talk about advancing racial equity in philanthropy. This conversation is hosted by Camelback Ventures, and these slightly irreverent but frank conversations feature leaders challenging the status quo plaguing philanthropy today. So it's those who are demonstrating how we can collectively build a more equitable and just funding landscape, particularly for organizations and businesses led by Black, Indigenous, other people of color, women, and non-binary founders. I'm Jessamyn Shams-Lau, Senior Advisor to the Capital Collaborative by Camelback Ventures, and I'm your host today. I spent over a decade leading a California family foundation, advocating for philanthropy with humility, and I also co-authored the book Unicorns Unite, How Nonprofits and Foundations Build Epic Partnerships. Today, I am so super excited to talk with Dahlia Joseph and Bianca St. Louis, two incredible women who are leading an amazing project called Resource. Dahlia is Senior Manager for Resource and Bianca is Program Director for Resource. So Bianca and Dahlia, welcome. Can you tell us a little bit more about yourself, personal, professional? What would you like our audience to know about you?
Sure. Yeah, I can jump right in. Hi, my name is Dahlia Joseph. I am a senior manager at Village Capital. I am from the DMV area, so DC, Maryland, Virginia area, specifically the Maryland and DC area, and I'm still based in that area. I made my way into impact investing / ecosystem building by way of communications and PR, actually, which is what my background is in. And I actually started as a communications intern at Village Capital many, many years ago, straight out of school. And that's kind of where I got my first taste of the space. And it's been history since. And I just grew more and more passionate about supporting entrepreneurs and ESOs, and have been doing this work for the last few years.
Brilliant. I love that story, Dahlia. It sounds like there's a lot of your personal growth that's happened within the VilCap community.
Yeah, for sure.
Bianca.
Hi everyone. My name is Bianca St. Louis. I am at BIA, serve as the program director for all things resource, right? So in terms of kind of a little bit more about me, originally from New York, I have also just been all over. So, lived in the Bay for a really long time. And I think that really shaped my perspective around investing in the future, right? So a lot of my work has really spanned in technology. I've worked in government, I've worked in nonprofits. So just really have done a lot of things. But I think the through line for me has really been, how do you enable more people to build? And I think that has really been something that has really shaped a lot of the things, the ideas, and the thoughts that I've had, and the work that I'd like to kind of put my time behind. So that's like a high level introduction, and again, really excited for the ways in which we're able to kind of bring out our superpowers for this partnership.
Brilliant. Thank you so much, Bianca. I love that kind of personal guiding motto. How do we enable people to build? That's so cool. You need a t-shirt on that. That on a t-shirt. You need that on a t-shirt or a bumper sticker. Okay, so thank you both for your introductions. And before we dive into Resource and your organization's partnership and all of the work that you're doing there, I do want to just quickly talk about language, because one of the reasons that this series is called It's Not Your Money is because we often / all the time incorrectly label the money in foundations and donor advice funds as still belonging to the founder of the organization. And when we label it that way, we also act like the money in the foundation actually belong to them, which perpetuates its concentration of power in terms of where money flows and how it flows. So words really influence who holds power in our world. So Dahlia, I'm going to direct this question at you. I would love to just quickly hear, what shift in language do you think we need to make that might help us disseminate power a little bit more in our work?
Yeah, for sure. That is a really good question. And I really appreciate the name. It's not your money, because you're right, it's not their money. Um, but I totally agree. Like words really influence who holds that power. And that's why I think it's super important for foundation leaders to take pledges, to continue to commit to changing the way that we do things, and to also stick to those pledges. Um, I think a positive that we've seen in the last few years is we've seen a lot more pledges in the past few years, including a lot of, or including a number around bringing more diverse voices into the room, which has been awesome. But the negative side of that is that we've also seen some foundations kind of pulling back a little bit and retreating from those racial justice work or pledges that they've made over the last few years. And they've just kind of backed off from funding movement work, or just overall failed on those pledges.
Yeah. So your point is like, yeah, the words are super important. We've got to get the words right, the commitments, things have to be written or said, but then there has to be action behind it.
Yeah. Yeah. And then like consistent action too. I think it's also important to note like that they use their power consistently and not just when something bad happens.
Love that theme of consistency. Yes, definitely. Yeah, it's very easy to react when we're all feeling the feelings and to, you know, show up as our best selves. And then when the world decides we're back to business as usual, then we
it's like nothing happened.
There we go. Exactly. Power still remains undisseminated. Thank you so much, Dahlia. I appreciate you allowing us to take us on that little tangent. Okay, let's dive into Resource. So Resource is a project of the two organizations that you each represent, Village Capital and Black Innovation Alliance. Can you tell us a little bit about the organizations and why you decided to combine forces to address racial equity and racial justice?
I'll let Dahlia kick it off, because I feel like it's like the umbrella, the VilCap umbrella, and then we kind of, you know, how do we amplify the work? So yeah, I'll let you kick that off, Dahlia.
Yeah, so VilCap is a nonprofit that's been around for about 12 years. We are also an entrepreneur support organization ourselves. We support startups and work with founders, and we run an accelerator program for startups. And more recently, in the last few years, an accelerator for accelerators and incubators in the US and East Africa, and in the Middle East as well.
Cool. And over at Black Innovation Alliance, I was like, at the end of this month, we'll celebrate like our 2-year kind of since we've been out here. But BIA is a coalition of, you know, ESOs, so Entrepreneur Support Organization, and ISOs, you know, innovator support orgs as well. And really this coalition focuses on really activating a lot of the folks that tend to be on those front lines, right? So BIA really focuses on, you know, clearing out those pathways, creating programming, creating resources, but really creating that infrastructure to support this coalition of leaders across the country. So that really is kind of our anchoring focus, really activating those folks that are usually the first line, the first conversation that a lot of these entrepreneurs are having. So that's kind of where we center a lot of our focus.
Brilliant. And yeah, so bringing it together.
Yeah. And I think at the beginning of COVID, it really started to draw out some, or really exacerbate the inequalities that were already in place. COVID-19 really disproportionately affected communities of color more than anyone. And so systems like healthcare, education, finance, or even housing, systems that were really meant to protect us and our well-being, were the same systems that were letting down communities of color. And so Village Capital and BIA joined forces to support in the best way that we know how, which is through supporting entrepreneurs and entrepreneur support communities. And so we have been working together for almost 2 years now.
As long as we've been existent.
As long as you guys have been existent. And it's really been such an awesome journey, and awesome working with the Black Innovation Alliance.
And I think to really add, additional color, no pun intended, VilCap is majority, BIA, Black Innovation Alliance, focuses a lot on Black-led, ESOs, ISOs, right? And VilCap, amazing folks, by the way, amazing. But I do think really thinking about power, really thinking about privilege and access, right? We're like, okay, so we have these skill sets, we have this area of capacity, you have the longevity, when funders would look at a VilCap versus a BIA, there's gonna be different types of reception. So it's like, how do we accelerate the progress of the work in collaboration, right? There are things that both organizations just do really well, the ways in which we're able to kind of cultivate capacity, right? And it was important for us to be like, okay, these are the ways in which we can leverage collaboration, power, our collective power, really to drive the outcomes we wanted to see, and ultimately serve at scale, these communities. So I think there is really a cool opportunity to kind of meld these two spaces, the time that Village Capital had already been in this space, and then also just kind of that, the cultural nuances and understanding, right, of how do you specifically target these communities. So I think there's a really cool opportunity in that partnership. And as we've seen, it's really yielded some really awesome fruit.
Brilliant. Well, and I love that there's actually in this partnership, there's an acknowledgement of the power and the privilege of being a mostly white-led organization, and being able to acknowledge that and then say, okay, and because of that privilege and platform, we recognize we have a role to play in disseminating that power, in sharing it, in seeding it in certain ways. So that's amazing that your two organizations recognize that there was a possibility for real partnership there. And so tell us just a really short version of what exactly Resource does.
Yeah, so Resource, like I mentioned, is an accelerator for accelerators. And I think that's probably the easiest way to describe it. But we provide accelerators and incubators with training, connections, because that's also a really big piece of what the problem is the lack of connections and lack of network permeation. And so we've spent a lot of time on that. And then also, most importantly, capital. So each organization that goes through our program, we provide some capital to. And so we've already run 2 cohorts so far, which is crazy because it feels just like yesterday that we started. But we have an awesome community of alumni of 23 accelerators and incubators throughout the US.
Amazing. That is really incredible momentum. And I think it also speaks to the power of accelerating the accelerators as well. There's there's a really great snowball effect there that you're getting. So as I think you both know, the Capital Collaborative is run by Camelback Ventures, which is also a Black-led organization that focuses on funding and supporting leaders of color, entrepreneurs of color. And a common reaction from funders is, well, we don't fund intermediaries because we provide funding directly to entrepreneurs. And I'm kind of, saying that in a kind of a poking fun voice, because I've said it myself. As a funder, I have written that in an email to people. So I know this is a really common reaction, because I've said it, and I've heard from those fundraising on behalf of these sorts of organizations that we were in a long line of funders who all had that same reaction. So I am sure that you hear this too. So I really want to, like, you know, lift up this opportunity to make the case. Like, why is it important for funders to fund entrepreneur support organizations, incubators, accelerators, funds, and not solely entrepreneurs directly?
I think it goes into being a bit holistic on your solutions, right? So, you know, entrepreneurs, yes, that's one piece of the conversation. But if we think about going back to the cultural aspect, right? Most folks aren't operating in silos. They're not operating as individuals. So I think about the role of institutions for a lot of underrepresented founders, whether you think of like a school, a church, like a lot of these things would happen in community. There are these like vessels, right, that would activate these groups of folks. So I think about with ISOs and ESOs, for a lot of these entrepreneurs, particularly, actually, if you think about a lot of the funding, it went to entrepreneurs that had gone through an accelerator. A lot of the capital that was actually flowing to entrepreneurs, they had passed through, like whether it was a Black or Brown led accelerator, right? So we would be remiss to literally ignore the data that is showing that, like, you know, this is a very integral part of the success of these entrepreneurs. And the reality is that, you know, these organizations are so essential to the success of these to these entrepreneurs. So many entrepreneurs will tell you, I went through a program or I participated in this, and once I did that. So it's not even a conversation of mentorship or like, because I think a lot of times folks are focusing on like mentorship and all that stuff, but I think it really is a space of this is a connection point to the people that we hope to serve. And in resourcing the people that are often resourcing these folks, whether through capital, whether through like late night phone calls and kind of helping those entrepreneurs, you know, work through issues, like they're usually that first line. So what would it look like for us to really pour into and invest in literally the people that are often a quick resource, right, for these groups of folks? So I think really just thinking about how do the communities that you serve grow, and who are the players in helping them grow, and knowing that like it's not just going to be that direct investment, but a lot of times those communities grow in community. So I think really kind of there's an opportunity to explore that too.
I love that theme of community, because entrepreneurship can be a really lonely, painful road to walk. And having a set of peers to navigate those challenges, often that people are navigating for the first time, like they're first time entrepreneurs, you know, they don't necessarily even have any training in entrepreneurship and, you know, business management or whatever it is that they're doing. And having a set of peers with commonalities, whether it's cultural or like issue area or identity, like I've definitely heard from entrepreneurs that it's that opportunity to build relationships that they can depend on and talk to unfiltered as well. Everything we hear is funded is filtered 1,000 times, right? You're never going to get 100% the unfiltered truth because of power dynamics, but the ESOs are able to do that, and that is a huge value. Okay, I'm going to move us on. Sorry, go ahead. Go, Bianca.
I actually, the other thing too is the proximity and understanding. So I think about how many entrepreneurs are lost in the filter, right? I think when you said the word filter, it really like had me thinking of like, you know, these ESOs and ISOs are also able to, due to relationship, are able to source and find entrepreneurs that may probably be overlooked, right? I think if you're leveraging this kind of big picture filter of who folks support, we're not really seeing a lot of change or difference. But I do think with these ESOs, with these ISOs, you're able to have a different filter, one that is closer, one that is understanding of that journey that that founder has been through. And I feel like the diligence looks different, right? Versus it just being filtered out. It's like you actually have someone that has that relationship, that actually has done the diligence around that founder. So I think there's even a space of like, we can actually reach more people by being in community with people that understand them, know them, and can vouch for them essentially. So that's the other thing too. Okay.
Yeah.
I wanted to add other thoughts. So.
Well, can I just add one more thought? But I think that like, especially ESOs that are led by people of color, the curriculum and resources are not just copy and paste from Silicon Valley. Like they are very specific and they require a lot of nuance and cultural competency too. And so keeping that in mind as a funder, when you're thinking, well, why would I fund an ESO and not an entrepreneur? Like, to also keep that in the back of your mind too.
Yes, 100%. And I think as funders, we don't know what we don't know, right? So we're not necessarily aware of, you know, what that experience is like or what might need to be different, because we're not on the other side of the processes that we impose on others. So yeah, okay. Well, I think we're going to kind of dig into this a little bit more, because I wanted to kind of talk about your advice and guidance for funders, because when I was leading a foundation, I know we made like hundreds of mistakes in how we supported those we funded. We tried really, really hard to be, you know, to regard our nonprofit partners as our clients, but you know, again, back to this point, we didn't know what we didn't know, and we weren't the ones going through the process that we had designed. And you know, our identity is different to their identity, whether that's a racial identity or whether it's a role and title identity, or you know, there's a lot of layers there. So thinking about the mistakes that funders make, what mistakes have you seen funders make when supporting organizations focused on empowering founders of color, so that people can see, oh, okay, maybe I should rethink the way I do that or approach that conversation? What are a couple of tips?
That is such a good question.
For a long list.
How much time do you? No, I'm kidding. I think one mistake that we see quite a bit is like funders assuming that they need to dictate what the solution is. I think there's a tendency for corporations and foundations to be really prescriptive or promote interventions that really miss the mark or even aren't things that people need, right? And so historically, like solutions that are provided to people with a lot of money, it tends to come out of like, unfortunately, extractive relationships. You go into a space, you hear their problems, you take it from that community, and then you take that credit as if you came up with it, but really that community that didn't have access to it has been trying to work on that, and you've come in and taken credit for somebody else's work. So I think being super like respectful of that space and not trying to dictate a lot of solutions, especially if you're not familiar with the space.
Yeah, 100%. I love that point, that often the solutions are already there in community, but maybe the resources to execute them have been kept away from the community or extracted from the community historically. Yeah, thank you, Dahlia. So and this is another big question, you might have like 10,000 answers, but I'm going to ask you to just keep to one or two. But if funders listening today walk away with just one or two actions that would move the funding industry towards a place of truly demonstrated racial equity and racial justice, what would you each urge funders to do?
I would actually say move in partnership. move in partnership and true collaboration. I think there's often this energy of saving and prescribing, and that, you know, people are these things that you need to fix, but like, what does it look like to move in partnership, to understand these are the ways in which I show up and my, you know, my power, and this is the power of the person that I'm seeking to fund, and what does it look like for us to move collaboratively. So I think that is definitely like one thing that comes up. And then the other thing is take a little risk, and invite a bit more trust. I think there can often be this like fear and worry and like, well, what if you waste and squander, like, you know, what does it look like to move in trust? What does it move to, you know, move in an understanding, right? Seeing possibilities rather than, you know, the worst case, like assuming all negative intent. So I think those are two things that I would really say and invite funders to consider.
I love that encouragement to really focus on partnership and hopefully have that conception of partnership informed and perhaps even dictated by those who have the least power traditionally in the relationship. Thank you, Bianca. Dahlia, did you want to add something?
Yeah, just building off of what Bianca said, I think just taking a risk, like I know it's easier said than done, but you know, funding early programming of ESOs and ISOs really requires bold action. And it can be risky, but I think it's worth taking that risk to fund that. I think another thing that comes to mind as well is like simpler and clearer funding processes. We have to remember that ESOs are usually juggling like 100 different things at a time. And it is a huge lift when the process isn't clear or there's like millions of steps to that process.
Oh, 100%. Yes. Yeah. And not just ESOs, like anybody who is fundraising. Like this isn't the reason that their organization exists. Their organization exists to do all of this other really important stuff. And if they're having to spend all their time trying to understand, trying to figure out how to navigate, trying to actually complete a complicated process, like we're shooting ourselves in the foot, aren't we?
Yeah.
Like it's taking time away from what we allegedly are interested in investing in. So yes, 100%, Dahlia, thank you. Okay, we're coming towards the end of our time and I want us to end reflecting on the future. So if your wildest amazing dreams were realized for reform in the philanthropy world and funders took those steps that you have just suggested, just paint me a brief picture of how would things look different for Black communities, for communities of color, let's say 25 years from now?
I think organizations or programs like Resource or VILCAP or even BIA like would become obsolete because we would have done our job, right? We would no longer need to exist, and the entrepreneurs or entrepreneurs of color feel supported and they have the resources that they have to succeed. So I think that would be my dream in the next 25 years.
Amazing. Bianca, did you want to add anything there?
Yeah, I think for me, like the vision I see is that instead of folks having, I think, let me step back. I would just want to see people be able to dream without thinking about, oh, this is all the infrastructure or institutions that I don't have the backing of. But I think people being able to dream and build unfiltered, right? And I think we would just see more authentic companies and ESOs, ISOs, rather than it being so rooted in what makes me desirable to a funder. So I would want, maybe the future that I see is one that is, you know, founder-led, it's ESO-led, right? What are their dreams for the future versus what container is palatable for the industry? So I think I would really want to see an environment that dreams are coming into fruition and dreams that are more diverse dreams, you know, are really able to grow and thrive. And really echoing what Dahlia said, I don't want to see an org like resource need to exist, right? In the decades to come. Like I really do want us to be obsolete. So yeah.
I love those answers because like you're painting a picture for me where the power has completely shifted. The power isn't held by those who are most proximate to money. It's held by those who are community or who are representing community. Those are the individuals whose needs are being catered to, who are dictating what happens, how it happens, what organizations are necessary or not. Thank you so much. It's really beautiful. Okay, viewers, we've come to the end of our time together this month, but I really want to encourage you to check out Resource, as you've heard Dahlia and Bianca describe their work. The website is resource-initiative.com. You can find out more over there. And then I also, as per usual, would love to encourage you to check out the Capital Collaborative program by Camelback Ventures. This is a program that helps white identifying funders deepen their commitment and efforts to advance racial equity and racial justice through their work in philanthropy, impact investing, and mainstream investing. And we are accepting applications now for our next cohort. You can find more information online at camelbackventures.org. That is all for today. And I just want to say thank you so much, Bianca, Dahlia. Really appreciate who you are in this world and what it is that you're doing together. Thank you for sharing it with us. And thank you so much to all of our audience for tuning in and listening.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.